Today on Reese Dixon, we are making these fabulous cable knit pillows. Hi everybody, it's Teresa with ReeseDixon.com. I am still making tons of gorgeous bedding to go in my master bedroom makeover. So today I wanted to share this pillow with you that I think might be my current favorite project. I got this gorgeous yarn from Lion Brand and I set about making this cable knit pillow, which has been in my head since before I ever started with the bedroom. I wanted this like a big, thick, luxurious knit somewhere in my house. So I'm so excited to finally have it realized. So the first thing I had to do was come up with the pattern that I wanted. So let me show you how I knitted this baby up, and then I'll show you how to finish it. Here's the yarn that I'll be using for this project. Lion Brand yarn, Hometown USA. It's a super bulky yarn and it's in Cape Cod tweed. And I'm using the needles that the yarn called for, which are size 13. And I'm using circular needles just because they're easier for me to work with. I don't like having the super long pieces jutting out if I can avoid it, so circular needles are great for that. So now we're going to cast on. The method that I like is called a slingshot method. There's a whole million different ways to do this, but this is the kind that I like. You need to leave yourself a big long tail since we are casting on 57 stitches. So first you need a slip knot. You're going to wrap the yarn around your two fingers like this, just making a loop, and then cross those two pieces of yarn. And then with these fingers, reach through and grab the yarn that's on the bottom and pull that. And that makes your slip knot. So put that one on your needles and that's your first stitch. You pull it tight, but not too tight. This method, the slingshot method, tends to be a pretty tight cast on, so you just want to make sure you leave yourself plenty of room. So to do the slingshot method, you'll take your thumb and forefinger and put it right between those two pieces of yarn and then kind of open it up like you're making a finger gun. Pew, pew, pew. Okay, so then bend your finger gun over and you're left with this extra piece of yarn right here hanging off your thumb, and that's the yarn you want. So you'll come around the top and underneath to grab that with your needle and then let it go off your thumb and pull it tight. And that's 2 stitches cast on. So let me show you again. Finger gun, grab that yarn. Finger gun, grab the yarn, pull, like that. Finger gun, grab the yarn, pull. Okay, so you'll do that 57 times and then we'll start our pattern. This is the little cheat sheet I made for myself so that I could just carry around this small little piece as I carried my knitting around. And so this is the pattern that I drew up with a key. So every time there's a dot, that means knit. When it's filled in, it means purl. And if it's slash, which you can see right there and right there, that's where I do my crossovers to make the cables. So let me show you how this pattern works. Now, the slingshot method that I like, the one drawback it has to it is that it starts you out on a wrong side row. So look at the difference between this side and this side. See how pretty that nice little straight line is? That I want on the front, but it starts me out so that I'd have to make this my front. So whenever I use the slingshot method, I add a wrong side row before I get to the heart of my pattern. Since in this case it's going to be cabled, I wanted to add that wrong side in the same pattern. So I just flipped, because of the way these wrong sides are knit, it's just the exact opposite, just flipped of the front row, or the front side, this first row. So I flipped it already. If you use a different cast on method, you don't need to worry about any of that. But if you use the slingshot method, you'll just kind of make instead of a first row, you'll make kind of like a 0.5 row that is the opposite of this pattern in the first row. So, but now we're just going to jump right into this pattern as written, and it starts with 3 purl stitches. So basically each cable is 6 stitches wide. There's 2 on one side, a blank middle, and then 2 on the other. And then in between each cable are 3 stitches, 3 purls. Well, at least when you're on the front row. So we'll start with our 3 purls that kind of make that border between the cables. And then now is when we get to our first cable. And so it's 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits. That's what will make up each cable on the front side of your knitting. So 2 knits, oops, 2 purls, and then 2 more knits, and then we need our border again between the cables. So that's these 3 purl stitches. And it's going to be important in this pattern to distinguish between a purl stitch and a knit stitch. So see how these 3 stitches have that little loop right at the base? That's how you can tell a purl stitch. And these 2 don't have it, so those 2 are knit stitches. So once you get your first row in, you can really just do this entire piece by following directly what's in front of you. You knit the knits and you purl the purls. So you just really have to get through your first row, which, like I said, I've already done because I did that 0.5 row. But you can just do that by following this little pattern here. So right now we're here. I just did those 3 purl stitches. So then we'll knit 2. And purl 2. And knit 2 more. Okay, so we have just completed one of that little pattern there. And what we'll see, you can just start to see in these knit stitches, that's where one cable will be and it will start to cross. And here's where the other cable will be and will start to cross. So each one of these patterns is 2 cables side by side, and they'll twist at different times to make up that pattern. So for the size of the pillow that I wanted to repeat this section 3 times, and then I'd end on a purl 3. So you can make this as big or small as you want. You just have to add up the stitches to repeat that pattern section, and then add 3 more stitches at the end so you can end with that purl 3 border section. So I'm going to do that all the way across, just repeating this over and over again until I get to the last 3 stitches, and then I'll purl those. And once you flip it over, so here's that wrong side, you'll just knit the knits and purl the purls. So here I would knit, 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 purl, purl. See, you look for the bumps. Knit, knit, purl, purl. Knit, 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 purl, purl. See, you just look for those bumps, and whenever you find one, that's what you purl. And so you can go through this entire piece just knitting the knits and purling the purls in that pattern until you get to rows 5 and rows 9, and that's where you make your crossovers. So I'm going to knit away until I can get to that row and then show you how to make those twists in your cable. So now, according to this pattern that I'm following, I am on row 5, and that's where our twists start to happen. So you can see pretty clearly how that rib takes shape. So at each of those ribs, we're going to twist it. But because our pattern is kind of meandering, not each twist will twist at the same time. I liked how it looked when you twist at different intervals. So on the 5th row, we'll twist every other of our rib sets. And then on the 9th row, we'll twist every other. So on the 5th row, see, according to my pattern, you can see the twist happens down there. So we're going to do our first, knit our first section as normal, and then once we get to the 2nd rib section, that's when our twist happens. So let me get up to that point so that I can show you where to go from there. The first 3 stitches are just the background, and then the next 6 stitches, that first ribbing section, I've stitched as normal according to our pattern. Then I've done the next 3 stitches, and here that's what those stitches are right there. Those you knit normally, again, knitting the knit stitches and purling the purl stitches. And so here we are at our 2nd rib section. So this is a cable needle, but you can do just about anything to hold your needles. I've used one of those little Starbucks, those little green sticks that plug your holes. I've used chopsticks or even like a lip liner, just about anything will work. But this is the official tool for the job, the cable needle. So I'm going to take this and slide 4 stitches off of this needle and onto my cable needle. Okay, so I've got the last 2 stitches of our little rib section still on this needle. So I'm going to take this cable needle and hold it in the back behind all of my knitting, and use this the yarn that you're working with to kind of pull your needles close together. You want this is what kind of starts your twist off, so you want this fairly tight. So I'm going to knit these 2 stitches, skipping over everything that I've got back here on my cable needle. So I knit those 2. Now, because of this, the way that my rib sections are going, I have that blank spot in the middle. So I'm going to take those 2 purl stitches, which are the back 2 stitches here, and I'll put those back on the needle. And I'll purl those as normal. But before I do that, I'm going to bring my needle to the front. This is kind of what makes that twist, and the direction that your twist goes is whether your needle's in the front or in the back when you're stitching. So now I will purl these 2 stitches. I'm such a tight knitter, I have to wrestle with it whenever I do my cable. Okay, and now I will knit these last 2 stitches that are hanging out on this cable needle, which started as the first stitches of our rib section, but now we've twisted them all up so they're the last stitches of our cable. See, I'm such a tight knitter, I just have to give myself some more room there. And then knit that last one there. And now that's my twist. So I go back to following the pattern. That was just that one repeat. So the next one I'll knit as normal, and then when I get here, I'll do another twist. So I'll do that all the way across the row. So I'll have 3 twists the way that I'm doing this pattern. And then for rows 6, 7, and 8, I go back to just the standard knitting the knits and purling the purls. And then when I get to row 9, I will do another cable stitch just like that little twist, but I'll do it in the first rib section, the 3rd rib section, and the 5th rib section. instead of where I've already done it. So I'm gonna do that over and over and over again, just knitting the knits, purling the purls. It's a super easy pattern to remember. You don't have to really remember anything. Once you've done that first row, you don't have to remember anything other than 5 and 9, 5 and 9, and then everything else you just can do on autopilot since it's such a simple pattern. So I'm gonna go knit my little heart out, and then once it's time to cast off, I'll show you how we do that. So I did not measure this at all to decide when I was going to be done. I just stitched to the end of my second skein of yarn and then called it good enough. So here is all that's left of my second skein, and I'm going to cast off. So I will be ending on the wrong side, just because that's where I happen to run out of yarn. And I'm going to cast off in the stitch pattern. So on the wrong side, we're just going to copy the stitches we see, but I will be casting off in that way too. So let me show you. These first 3 stitches are knit stitches. So I'm going to knit the first one, knit the second one, and then cast off with the yarn still in the back as it would be for a knit stitch, and then pull one loop over onto the other. So here's another knit. So with the yarn in the back, I'll knit that stitch and then pull it off. Okay, so now the next 2 stitches are purl stitches. So I bring my yarn forward, purl that stitch, and then with that yarn forward, I'll pull that back loop over the front loop. Here's another purl, so I do it that way again. Back loop over the front loop, and then we're back to knit stitches. You can definitely tell, see again, how there's like that loop and there's no loop. So that's knit, knit, purl, purl, and you can tell all the way across. So here's a knit, so my yarn's pulled to the back, knit, and then pull that loop over, and I'm just going to keep doing that all the way across my piece. So this is what the finished knit looks like. I have all of my ends still loose, and I'm really not even going to worry about weaving them in. It's a nice thing about finishing it as a pillow, since you're not going to ever deal with the inside. You don't have to worry about that part too much. But I just repeated that 10 row pattern over and over again until I had the size that I want. And I basically just used 2 skeins of yarn, and when the yarn was done, I was done knitting. So I didn't even bother counting how many rows this was. I just wanted that consistency of the 2 skeins of yarn per pillow. So that's the front. You can knit another one for the back in exactly the same manner if you want to, but I just went with some fabric that I already had on hand, and it's this lovely like minky fabric. So I cut 2 pieces here that are the same width as the pillow when it's all, as the knit piece when it's, you know, good and stretched out, and then they are tall enough that when put together they can overlap, which is, as I've been demonstrating, is my favorite method of pillow construction. So with these 2 pieces that were tall enough to overlap, I hemmed one end of each like this. And then with the right side up, just as I've been doing before with all the different shams that I've done on the YouTube channel, I'm going to line the edges up with that hemmed section overlapping. And then this, since this knit likes to kind of collapse in on itself and shrink up, pinning is very important so that you can get everything to lay nicely as you're sewing. So now I just get to sew all the way around and my pillow's done. So here's the finished pillow again, and I just love it. I love the combination of that snuggly minky fabric on the back with this big thick knit on the front. It's just so cozy. I made my own pillow insert with just cheap discount fabric and some stuffing, but you can just buy those anywhere. Anywhere you buy fabric will have pillow inserts too. So that you don't have to bother with that if you don't want to. But I always like to have a separate pillow on the inside so that I can take this off to wash it, and it just wears better that way, I think. And I think the stuffing looks better when there's that extra layer kind of containing it all. And then this part just gets to be pretty instead of doing that job as well. So I love how this project turned out. Thank you to Lion Brand for giving me the yarn to get this project out of my head and into reality. If you have any questions, leave me a comment, and be sure and subscribe to the channel so you can see the big reveal of the master bedroom when it's all done. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.